So thank you for joining us on the locker room this Friday night. You're joined by me, Regan Stevenson, and you're also joined by Mikey. Thank you for joining me, Mikey.
No problem. Thanks for having me on again.
It's a bit different for everybody this Friday, Mikey. It's usually the dulcet tones of Graham and Michael, but yeah, I'm in the hosting chair this week. Um,
Yes, it's different.
I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll get a few others to join us over the course of the 2 hours. But no, it's great to have you on again, and we'll be talking a lot Scottish sport over the next 2 hours, and it'll be interesting. I mean, it's been a busy week of Scottish sport. Just want to start. Obviously, I've no spoken to you since last week, but what's your thoughts on the Scottish Cup semi-finals?
Well, I think there's two very different games. I think the Aberdeen Celtic game was a classic, and the Hearts Rangers game definitely wasn't. I think watching the Aberdeen Celtic game, that was definitely one of the best games this season. I think it kind of became Aberdeen's cup final because they weren't really playing for anything else, and you could see that. Obviously, the two late goals at different times in the game really sort of had a huge impact on the entertainment value. But I think that overall, I'd say Celtic just about deserve to get through. I think we'll talk about the penalty decisions and have some pretty strong opinions on them. But I think overall, with that Celtic Aberdeen game was a brilliant game. And then for Rangers Hearts, it was pretty poor. I thought the quality of the game was maybe not the best. I think that Hearts were okay going into the final third, and then in the final third they were pretty poor. But
Yeah,
Rangers got the job done.
yeah. I mean, people have not been impressed with Cyril Dessers for the season, but I thought his first goal on Sunday was a great goal, and then obviously that Celtic Aberdeen game. I was at the match, watching it, and I thought the game was just great. I thought it was a great match to be involved in. I thought Aberdeen played really well. Aberdeen got off to the best possible start through Miovski. I've always rated Miovski. I thought he would be a possible Celtic or Rangers player. I really did. I think he's somebody that can just put the ball in the back of the net. And yeah, I thought Aberdeen played really well. Obviously, Celtic get in front 3 times and you think they're just going to see out, but it's one of those ones where it's a great ball in by Junior Hoyle, and it's one of those ones where somebody just needs to put their head through it or put their feet through it, and you score the goal. But I think for Aberdeen's point of view, I think they can still be proud of the performance.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think a lot of the fans agree with that as well. I think that when you were kind of watching the game, there was times where Aberdeen kind of dropped into that sort of poor performance that they've been having over the course of the season, but they just didn't they just didn't let up. They didn't give up in the game, and I think that was basically all credit to them. I think if you're looking at the sort of, I guess, balance of play, you could say Celtic deserve it, but I guess for the sort of moments that Aberdeen had, they maybe just had that sort of like that factor where you want them to go on and win it. Obviously, you wouldn't as a Celtic fan, but I think that it was a very entertaining match, and I think for Aberdeen, as I said, it kind of became their cup final as their season's basically over now, or
Uh,
it was if they didn't win. And for Celtic, they've got a title to win, so you could kind of see when it went to 3-3, I was thinking Aberdeen could go and win this now on penalties, but in the end, it just wasn't to be.
I know people were complaining during the game and also after the game. It's also good behind it. What did you make of Joe Hart taking the penalty? I've not spoken to you since about it. What did you make of Joe Hart taking the penalty?
I mean, fair play to him for stepping up. It wasn't the best attempt, but I thought it was a little bit, I wouldn't say arrogant from him to go and step up and try and win it himself. But I mean, if he's going up, if it was a sort of pre-planned thing, then fair enough. But if he's just done it in the moment, then I guess you could kind of make the argument that it's a little bit arrogant from him. But I mean, fair play, stepped up, took it, and he went and basically won Celtic the shootout after. So it doesn't really matter from a Celtic point of view.
Yeah, and I just want to say, don't forget you can comment on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and you can put your comments on the screen. So if you want to ask me or Mikey a question, then you're fair play to you for doing that. We can answer your questions. But and I think in terms of the 25th of May, it's going to be a great final. I think between Rangers and Celtic, Mikey?
I think a lot of these sort of finals always seem to be hyped up and then they kind of under underperform. But I mean, I'm going to hold the optimism that it'll be a good final. I think that based on the balance of the season, I think Celtic will go and win it now. And I think it was a very, very difficult challenge for Celtic. And I think getting over that line into the final might just carry them on a little bit. But it really just depends what stage they're at because go back a month, Rangers were looking like they were flying and they were going to actually go and win the league. And then roll on 3 weeks later and it's all in Celtic's hands again. So you never know. But I'm just hoping it's a good game because they often aren't and they often really do sort of flatter to deceive in that sense.
Yeah, and obviously it's the first time since 2002 from that famous Peter Lovenkrands moment, Mikey.
Yes, well I wasn't born, so I wouldn't remember it, but
Show your age there, Mikey, showing your age. But I'm
yeah.
sure you're a star in the making it with all your football knowledge, mate. But yeah, I mean in terms of this weekend, Mikey, we've got Aberdeen against Motherwell to start us off at 3 o'clock tomorrow. What's your thoughts on that match?
I think it's two actually very evenly matched teams, I'd say. I think that Aberdeen have had a very poor season. I think over the course of the two squads, if you go man for man, Aberdeen have the better team. But yeah, again, it's just been the uncertainty around them with the manager situation. They've obviously got that set in stone now, which I guess could maybe help them. I think Motherwell have kind of bounced back from the really poor mid-season they had, and I think this game will actually be very entertaining. I think that going into Aberdeen at home, I think they might just about have the edge for that. But I genuinely could see it being a very entertaining game. Motherwell obviously stopped us from getting top six, so I hope they get battered. But nah, I'm not that bothered. But to be fair, I mean, it doesn't really matter who wins this game because, as I've said, bottom six doesn't mean anything. But obviously, it'd be nice to end the season with a nice few wins on the board for either of these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Aberdeen, I know people have been critical of Aberdeen not going for like a Malcolm Mackay, Neil Lennon kind of appointment, but are you happy that they've went down the route of a different approach?
I think it's different, but the problem with Scottish football is that you need one thing that you don't get, and it's time. It's no surprise that Jimmy Thielen, when he comes in, he'll need the time because, as I've said multiple times, you can't come in with a completely different squad to what you want and go and do well with it. So he's going to need time, and it's whether Aberdeen give him that. I think that next season, I wouldn't be too surprised if Aberdeen are bottom half, just on that sort of switch around season. But then again, they could go and finish third for all we know. I think he needs time. That's the main thing. And with the likes of Neil Lennon, as you said, they kind of get a bit more time by default because they've proved it in this league already that they deserve the time. With the likes of Jimmy Thielen, like if they're doing badly on a run of form, then the sort of it can sort of spiral a little bit because they don't have that experience and the fans don't know what to expect. So I think with the likes of Neil Lennon, and you know what you're going to get from him with Malcolm Mackay, you know what you're going to get with him
Yep.
with a new manager, you don't always know. So I think it's going to be quite difficult. But if they give him the time, I'm pretty sure he'll do quite well because his win record is quite good.
Yeah, and I don't mean quite. I'm just going to share my thoughts on it. I think it's quite bold. I think obviously there's times where Dave Cormack gets a little bit of negativity from the supporters and from the media, but I think it's quite bold to appoint someone like that. You look at them. I know he's not appointed well before in Stephen Glass, but I think you need sometimes you can go through that managerial approach where you appoint the same kind of suspects where you appoint like Neil Lennon, people like that, where who've been round the block. But sometimes it's nice to see a fresh approach.
It is, and I think it's a bold one to take for Dave Cormack because of obviously the pressure that he's under. I think that you need to respect the sort of. I guess you kind of need to expect the sort of outward thinking instead of going within the sort of Scottish sphere and being a bit basic and kind of knowing what you're getting in a sense. But I'm pretty sure he'll do quite well for them. Maybe not next season, but in a couple of seasons. And it's like when Celtic appointed Ange Postecoglou, nobody knew who he was. And there was there was that kind of surprise factor when he first came in. They didn't start well, and I could see the same with Aberdeen. Obviously, I don't think they'll go on and win a treble, but I think that he'll do a good job with them. But the problem is, does he get that time which he deserves? And I think if you're making a bold call like that, then you're kind of setting up for the time to be given. So I respect the choice to go with him rather than someone who's constantly been around and around in Scottish football. So I respect it, and I think he'll do quite well.
Yeah, and I think in terms of Aberdeen, they go into this game of their last week's defeat, but I think they'll be buoyed by that.
I
And they'll
think
be
so, and I think the fans are right behind them as well. Sorry for cutting you off there, but I think the fans are right behind them.
I know, but I know people say they're in the bottom six and their season's finished, but I'm sure that they know they've got places to fight for because there's probably players in there that have got one that their contracts are about to run out or they've got 1 year left after the season and they're wondering if the manager's going to be able to keep them on next season. So I think this is a vital time for Aberdeen.
I think it's very important, but I don't think it's just on the sort of. I think obviously the results basis matters, but not the positional basis that they're in. I think that getting those good performances in at the end of the season can push you on to the next. And I'll give a sort of reverse example for that. Livingston and Hearts. So first of all, Livingston ended the season last season very badly, and then they went into the next season obviously very poorly, and now they're in this situation. So and then with Hearts, they lost I think 4 out of their 5 last games in the split in 2019, and then within a year they were relegated. And then for the contrary, you could have a team that ends a season really well and that pushes them on. So it's very important the momentum that you get, but when you get a new manager, you kind of halt that. So I think that the players will be fighting for their future at the club. I think that's one of the main things. But yet again, there could also be situations where the pressure gets to them. But I think the players there's not as much to fight for because the positional difference between seventh, eighth, and ninth for a team like Aberdeen, it doesn't hugely matter. It's still a failed season, so I think the pressure's kind of off them in a sense, and they can try and play for their own futures in a way, and that could either have a good effect or a bad effect.
Yeah, and in terms of Motherwell, I mean, I know Motherwell they've not finished top six, Mikey, but I think they've had a very, I think they can be impressed with their season. They went to Ibrox and won 2-1, and they went to Celtic Park and did well. They've beat Hearts quite a bit this season, and they're probably been very unfortunate that they didn't get top six in the end, and that just shows you the impact that Stuart Kettlewell was having at the end of the season because Motherwell were kind of stuck near the bottom of the table. Stephen will tell you they'd won one in 15, I think it was. Stephen was telling us,
Yeah,
and then they've sort of turned their thoughts, turned their form around. So it's going to be a big game for the two of them. It
it
was
will
just
be in a. Sorry, you continue.
no. I was just going to say, what's your score prediction for for that
I'm
match?
gonna go. I'm gonna go 2-1 Aberdeen. I think that Motherwell, that although they've done well, they're still kind of in that situation where there's maybe not quite as much to play for, because obviously they finished the sort of mid-season for them is what's really killed them in a sense because the start and the end have actually been very positive, and this was a season where there's the opportunity to go and get top six. So I think to an extent they'll be sort of cursing their luck at that mid-table form because, mid-season form because without that they'd be, I'd say, right in the mix for sort of fourth or fifth. Because when you take away that bad run of form, and fair play to them for sticking with Kettlewell, they would be right up there. And I think it's a lost opportunity for them. And they've gone from what could have been a very, very good season to what's kind of become an average season when they had the opportunity to kick on.
Yeah, I mean, um, I think Motherwell's been a real shining light this season. Um, I think in terms of probably the standout player would probably be Blair Spittle or Theo Bear. I mean, Theo Bear got in the team of the year. That's what the fellow professionals think, and I think it just shows you that Stuart Kettlewell was really good at developing players because this is a guy that was not doing well as St Johnson. They were probably glad to get rid of him last season, and he's done really well this season.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that they've had those sort of purple patches in form where everything just seems to go well for them, but they've also had the other way around where it's been very, very bad. So you're kind of stuck in that sort of 50-50 situation where you're like, is it a good season or not? I think it's kind of became sort of cancelled each other out because, I mean, if you were to take the results as like a general thing, then you could say it's an okay average season, but it's just the sort of huge sort of uprisings and then dips in form, which has really, really been a negative for them. But I think going into next season, they can take some confidence from how they've actually been playing since I'd say about February, March time. So I can I can sort of respect the job that they've done by keeping Stuart Kettlewell and sort of sticking by him, and it's kind of it's been paid off with decent results. So I think the pressure's off them for the end of the season, and they can just try and sort of, as I said with Aberdeen, just try and get the momentum going into the next season.
Yep, Paul Donaldson, a regular commenter here on the locker room, is saying that he just wants the season to end. It's been embarrassing.
Yep.
Yeah, I can probably see where he's coming from for there because Aberdeen started so well. They got a win at Ibrox and then they drew against Celtic, so they probably felt at that point that they were going to kick on and do well. And then they obviously got to the League Cup final, make it, and it was just a James Tavernier goal that cost them that. But you've got to say as well, Aberdeen did really well in Europe this season. I mean, to beat Frankfurt at home, and then to do really well away, you've got to say that. I wouldn't say, of course, there's probably a lot of times, Mikey, where because you finished third last season, there can be a little bit of overreaction, but I don't know if the Neil Warnock factor really played into it because I said it on this show a few weeks ago. I don't think Barry Robson was doing that bad, and I think for me, if they just stuck by him for a little bit longer, they probably would have got top six.
I think it's take the league out of it. Aberdeen, if you were to sort of move the league to the side and not look at it and just look at Europe and the two domestic cups, they've had a good season in that sense. I mean, they've done very well in Europe. They were competitive in every game they played, and then when they got to the cup final, they nearly won it actually. And it was a very poor game. Both teams were poor, so it could have went either way. And then obviously that game against Celtic. Take sort of the league out of it, and it's not been a bad season for them. It's just this whole sort of. I think there was a lot of. You have to kind of chop and change a lot when you're in Europe. And Aberdeen, I think, over the last sort of 3 years, bar the sort of 3 month kind of new manager bounce under Robson, they've been bottom half in the whole time. So I think that there's a bit of the sort of there was a bit of papering over the cracks towards the end of last season with the momentum they had, and to go into Europe and all the cup competitions and get to the final, and then obviously play such a big part in the European games, obviously been right up for them, and then go in Thursday, Sunday games. It did take a toll on the players, and then to sack Robson, I think was very harsh because they're in a situation where the players are knackered because they're playing two even 3 times a week sometimes. So it's a really difficult situation, but the standards were set last season and they were maybe quite unrealistic standards. So it was a very difficult one for sort of the decision to be made. And then the Neil Warnock things just completely knocked them off course because he came in at the time where it's most important to pick up results, I think.
I think it's spot on there, Mikey. I mean, people underestimate the Neil Warnock appointment. I think he could come in, probably underestimated Scottish football, I would say, and probably thought he would come in and save the day the same way they did at championship clubs down in England. But it wasn't as simple as that. And Aberdeen's a big job, you know, and it takes a big personality in him. And obviously, he wasn't up for that challenge because, as we know, after Aberdeen got to the quarter final, he decided to move on.
Yeah,
But we've got a question here that someone wants you to answer. So how do you think the players will go? And he's a Hamilton Accies supporter.
yeah, I know him. So I think in the championship, I think that it'll be a Partick Thistle v Ross County final, and that could genuinely go either way, in my opinion. I'd like to see Partick Thistle come up, but I think that based on the two squads, I just can't look past Ross County at the moment. And then for the championship, I think it'll be. I do think Hamilton will come up. In fairness, I think it's between them and Alloa. I don't think that Queens Park will hold their place. And then in League Two, I could not tell you because I don't watch League Two, so I'm kind of stuck on that one. But that's my opinion. That I think that Ross County will stay up, and then I think that Hamilton will go up to the championship.
I think in terms of League Two, it'll be interesting because um, I know this wasn't a talking point for the show, but we should probably mention it. And that the playoff final tomorrow between Bucky Thistle and East Kilbride has been postponed because Bucky Thistle failed to meet the regulations for the Scottish FA, Mikey.
I don't. There's quite a lot that I genuinely say about that. I think first of all, the integrity of the Highland and Lowland League is quite low anyway, because you've got B teams who can't get promoted. You've got teams who go down who lose so much money that it's impossible for them to come back up. And then basically anyone who goes down from League Two loses so much that they can't come back up. And then you've got a situation where you can win the league as a club who are running on the minuscule money they get, and then they can't come up because their stadium isn't good enough or whatever. So we're going to be in a situation where there's only 3 or 4 teams that can physically go up to the League Two, because a lot of these teams are playing in grass pitches with one stand, and then you've got, like, if you can't promote these teams, what's the point in them being there? And then you're in a situation where if these teams are playing in the league, they win the league, then the whole league just becomes null and void because they can't compete in the playoffs. So second misses out. Every other team that's in the Highland League or Lowland League, in whatever situation it is, they can't end up playing because they've lost out on first, so they can't play at all. So there's a situation where there'll only be 3 or 4 teams that can go up, and then it just becomes basically impossible. And every season you're going to have one team just going into a final.
Yeah, what do you make of that comment there? That the Bucky Thistle being disqualified means the pyramid is a closed shop.
It's true, because there's not a massive amount of League Two money in League Two, sorry, and there's even less in the Lowland League or Highland League. So getting in there is difficult enough without these regulations coming in, which makes it impossible for teams to go up. And then it means that all the other teams that can go up, which is probably about 3 or 4 of them, because these regulations are cutting off the teams that don't make enough money and don't have a good enough stadium, that it just becomes impossible for them. So the 42 are basically guaranteed a spot because they're going to be playing against teams that have had no preparation because they've had games postponed. And the league itself, anyway, you've got the B teams in it who can't go up. 3/4 of the league don't have a stadium to go up, the right sort of regulations to go up. So it just becomes, yeah, as Paul said, it becomes a closed shop that only 3 or 4 teams a season have the chance to go up, and if that, because they might not win the league. I find it ridiculous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a. The one thing I do like about it though, Mikey, is that East Kilbride are a progressive club. They've got quite a bit of money behind them. They've got the ex Darvel manager who beat Aberdeen, that who Paul Donaldson want me to mention. Probably one of the best Scottish Cup memories in, uh, in the last couple of years. But I think the big benefit for it is that progressive clubs like East Kilbride can go up, and you've seen examples with it with Bonnie Rose, with
Yeah,
Kelty Hearts. So you've seen the examples, but I do understand the point that Celtic B, Rangers B, even the Hearts B, these guys have got nothing to play for because they can't win the title.
that's the thing as well. And when you're going in a situation where you talk about progressive clubs, you're not. How are you going to progress by? You can't progress without money in any situation, because it's very difficult as it is with limited money, let alone no money coming in. So if you've if you're in a situation where you can't go up or you can't be promoted or you can't play in playoffs or whatever, you don't even have the chance to go up, then you can't expect to be progressive because no one will want to get involved. They want to get involved with a team, saying that they want to get involved with a team that's going to be able to get the chance to go up. And it's just one of those situations where we're locking ourselves into a situation where we're not going to be able to let anyone come up because the only quote unquote progressive teams, they're all going to go up. And then these teams that are going down from League Two are going to lose all their money and will either run out of business or be stuck in mid table for the whole season, fighting against teams who can't get promoted. I find it ridiculous.
Yeah, you're spot on there because you need progressive clubs that want to be there. I mean, there's some clubs there that are just happy to be in the Premier League and not spend any money. We've seen it with Brecon for years. They were in there for years, but they, they were paying no money. They were just happy to be there.
Yeah, that's the thing. And if it keeps your club alive by sometimes it can look different in person and sort of how it looks behind the screen or whatever because these teams they can't pay any money because there's not enough money in the leagues, so it's difficult enough with a lack of money coming in, and we've seen that with the likes of Cowdenbeath who have been in playoffs for years and years, and then they went down and they're now stuck in the Lowland League because they can't bring any money in. And you're going to be in a situation, as I said, where you've got 13 out of the 18 teams who can't get promoted, and then the other five who can are going to be either running away with the league every time or they're going to be stuck behind teams who can't get promoted. So the Highland and Lowland League, we don't do ourselves any favour with the pyramid anyway. But it's just worse when you're now not letting teams in because they don't have enough, like, they don't have a good enough stadium. When how are they meant to pay for a stadium if they don't make enough money out of the league? It just becomes a sort of a circle where you can't get out of it.
Yep. Mikey, I was asking people for the questions earlier, and people are bringing in some questions, so I'll bring in a question here for you.
Oh God, that's somebody I know, by the way. I don't know if you. I
No,
think he's joking about that one.
is there someone at your club who's uh, coming through the system, or
No, it's someone that I know that he keeps making fun of me about. So I just skip
oh,
over it if I was you.
no problem? Yep. So we spoke about the Aberdeen versus Motherwell. Tell us your prediction again for that one.
I said 2-1 Aberdeen for me.
2-1 Aberdeen. I'll go 2-1 to Motherwell.
Right.
And Mikey, the next match I want to go on to is St Johnson against the Hibees. What is your thoughts on that match? We'll start with the Hibees. For what do you make of Mick as your manager? Because it's a bit of a weird one, Mikey. I mean, he was brought in because they said he had a great record overseas in Australia, but in the big matches, we've not really seen much from um, the squad this season. Of course, thinking back against Rangers, against Celtic, even against Hearts, the derby match he was involved in was a 2-2 at Tynecastle, and then 1-0 victory when Shankland scored the last minute. So what have you made of your side this season? Do you think he should be given more time, or do you think it's up in the air? How do you assess um like the season so far for your team? Because like of course the top six would have been the aim, but it just feels like like it seems as if there's quite a lot of decent players there, but I wouldn't really say there's a standout player. Obviously, Martin Boyle's been injured, and Marcondes has been really good from he was signed. But what have you made of it so far?
So there's quite a lot into this because we started the season so badly in the league, but we did quite well in Europe until we played Aston Villa. But every Scottish team would have been beat off Aston Villa this season. So a European sort of venture, I'd say, was relatively successful. But then you've got a situation where we were bottom of the league after I think 3 or 4 games. We were basically forced to get rid of Lee Johnson because his style of football was very poor. I think that for Hibs this season, it's been so difficult for us to just kind of get a foothold because when Nick Montgomery came in, it wasn't his team, and it still isn't to an extent. So it's kind of difficult to gauge someone. As I said earlier, you can't go in with a different squad and be instantly successful. So he needed some time, and I think in January he made a few good signings and a few that have really not been very good. And I'd actually like to bring up the Marcondes one because I would disagree with you. I don't think he's actually been very good. I think he's been heavily overrated by our fan base in Scottish football as a whole because when you watch him, it looks like he's not really. He has one of those sort of play styles where it doesn't look like he's trying, and sometimes that does show through, and it gets really frustrating because it doesn't change whether you're 3-0 up against Livy or 2-1 down against St Johnstone. So it really depends on the sort of game that you're in. I think the likes of Triantis, who he brought in, who I had high hopes for, has been very, very poor. But I'd say, on the whole, I think for a decent spell of it, he's been okay. But it's just the same as always. When it comes to big moments, he's just not been good enough. And his tactical decisions have been very poor at times. Before the January window, he would do the same subs regardless of the game. There was a game where we were 4-0 down at Rangers. We brought Jimmy Jeggo on, who's a defensive midfielder. And then against, I can't remember who, but we were a goal down, and he brought on Jimmy Jeggo, a defensive midfielder, who is not going to get your goal. He's not going to do anything other than dictate the midfield, which we didn't need at the time. He's very one dimensional and he keeps the ball on the deck and passing it about, even when you're losing. So, with the squad we have, we can't play that play style. And if there's one main criticism, it's that you can't adapt to the sort of play style of the league. And there's been quite a few situations this season where I've been very annoyed, but I can see the vision he's going with, and I'll always stick by the manager regardless of who it is. But yeah, it's a very difficult situation because that squad that we have should not be finishing bottom half, regardless of his team or not.
Yeah, are you happy that he's looks like he's going to be given time?
I do like that because I like having the stability because I feel like when you let a manager have his time, it'll sort of fall into place. It might not be as good as you want it to be, but sacking managers every season just is not an effective way to run your club. And that's 3 years in a row now that we've been behind Hearts by we were 20 odd points behind them the first time, and then it was actually very close last season, and there's a massive gap again. So I think with the new investment that we're getting, I would like to back the manager. I think that he's brought in a few decent signings, but it's just his one-dimensional style of play really does annoy me. And bringing on the likes of Jair Tavares, who is one of the worst players that we've had in recent years, and he just consistently plays, and it's very, very disappointing. And I think that he needs his time, but it's gonna be difficult to get the fans on his side, especially with his sort of poor performance this season, because we can't forget that he came in, I think, 5 games into the season or something. So it's not like he's came in January and he hasn't had any time and he's sort of trying to impose himself. He's had a good few months now and it's not been working so far. So I'd say he deserves time, but his time is sort of running short in my eyes because there is situations where he's just not been good enough. And yeah, it's a very difficult one.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on Hibs is they've been a good club in Scottish football for many years, but I feel like over the past couple of years, the recruitment has not been that great from them, and I don't know if there seems to be a lack of accountability for that. I mean, I know Brian McDermott's been brought in. You'll know more about that about me, but yeah, happy with his signings. But from my point of view, I would say probably no. But from I want to get your thoughts on it.
I'd say it's the instability more than the sort of personnel we're bringing in. We've been rebuilding over and over again for years now, and we brought in I think 13 or so sort of first team players last summer. So it was a difficult one to kind of gel them in, and it actually relatively worked last season. But this season it's been so poor. We brought in Ellie Yuan on on a permanent deal after his excellent season last season. And his numbers haven't been bad, but he's been so frustrating. And I think trying to put a team together when you're bringing in new players every time is very difficult because you're in a situation where you're basically it can't be it can't you can't always adapt to bringing in 13 new players every transfer window, and we're bringing in players who have not given one care for the badge at all, and it's a very difficult situation that we're in. And I think we've had more misses than hits, so it's difficult on the sort of transfer recruitment side. But we've also brought in some very good players, so it's very difficult to tell. But it's just frustrating seeing the sort of situation we're in.
Yeah, Mikey, I don't know if you can still hear me, but you just cut off there at the last minute there. Sorry,
Right,
I'm struggling to hear Mikey here. I don't know if he's.
1 second.
Yeah, so as we were saying there about Hibs, it's one of those ones where we just need to wait and see what goes on. But I don't know if the manager will survive late on into next season. I think he'll be given the transfer window in terms of trying to improve the squad and improve the situation. But I don't know if the fans will put up with him actually being involved. But I think what Mikey was saying there was valid in terms of the transfer recruitment's not being the best.
There we
Um,
go.
I'm Mikey. What I was saying there was, I think you're bang on in terms of what you're saying there about the recruitment of the players. But now I just wanted to go on to about that news we got about a few weeks ago about that the Hibs are going to be involved with the Bournemouth owner. Are you happy with that? Because that might then give the manager some uh, some extra recruitment.
I think it's a positive because we've got that sort of chance where we can help other players develop, and it's kind of a win-win for both clubs. I think that multi-club ownership is the way it's kind of going in football, and especially in Scottish football. So it's a very difficult one to kind of gauge how it's going to go. But I think the whole thing about Bournemouth B or whatever, it is pretty funny. But it's one of those situations where if it goes well, then it can really benefit both clubs. And I'm more excited about the investment that we're hopefully going to get now. And that'll be able to sort of even the playing field for us because depending on who we bring in and who we get rid of, I think that we really do have some potential in the squad. We just need to get rid of some of the dead wood, in my opinion. And then we're really not in a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, just finally on him. So how long do you give the manager? I was talking there when you were off there about what possibly you could give him the transfer window and you'll give him some time and some backing, and then possibly maybe 10 games into the season, see how things are going. But how long would you give him?
It's very hard to tell because there's a lot of sort of variables in it where you could be obviously there's the sort of situation where you don't know when a manager should go because if you sack them early into a season then there's sort of less risk because the new manager has more time, but you're not getting a really accurate reading of how they're doing. And then if you sack them midway through a season, it causes a bit of unrest, and then towards the end, it's a bit pointless because you've already lost everything. So it's really difficult, and it depends on the situation we're in. But if we're bottom of the league after 10 games, then no doubt get rid of him. But I think it really just depends on the sort of variables that go into it, and I'd give him as long as possible within limit because obviously there's an acceptable way of failing in Scottish football and there's an unacceptable way. And managers aren't given enough time. I've been first to say that. But there's always going to be, it's going to be difficult to find a replacement. We don't know who's available at the time. So there's a lot of variables that go into it. So I couldn't really put a number on it at this time.
In terms of the match tomorrow against St Johnson, what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about this match? Because St Johnson have got a lot to play for there, right in it there with Aberdeen and Ross County as well.
I would not be surprised if they win this game because we've seen it time and time again with Hibs. It's the mentality that we have. It's not good enough, and it's really been sort of the negative of our season because we've thrown away about 20 points or something like that from winning positions, and we just don't have the sort of mental mental structure to kind of deal with any sort of challenges that come our way, and that's been our main sort of problem. And I think that a Craig Levein team is exactly what does not suit us. So I would not be surprised if they beat us. And genuinely, I think that I wouldn't say they go in as favourites, but they definitely wouldn't be major underdogs in my eyes. And I mean, we have nothing to play for now. We're not going to get relegated. Well, obviously, we can't go up the table. So I would not be surprised if they beat us. And it, honestly, the rest of the season for us could go horribly wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if it does, to be honest. So it's one of those situations where none of these players want to be in the bottom half. So now that the season's gone, how will they react to it? Will they just kind of sort of like kick their heels up and just be on the beach for the end of the season? So yeah, it's a very interesting one to see how it'll go, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also you've got the added incentive for Craig Levein, the ex-Jambo manager.
Yeah, well, he's already got his happiness against us this season, so I think there's a little bit less on his side there. But we know what a Craig Levein team's going to bring. I've seen it a few weeks ago when they beat us, and Mitov in goal is going to be a really difficult challenge to get past because I think he's been one of the shouts for Team of the Year. So it'll be a very, very difficult match. I have absolutely no illusion to that. I think that if we're going to win it, it'll be by the odd goal, but I could genuinely see them at least getting a draw, but if not even beating us. So I don't really have much confidence for us, and as I've said, there's not really too much to play for on our end, and they have a lot more to play for.
Mikey, be positive, mate. It's Friday night. Be positive. But
I can't be positive anymore.
yeah, I'm going to predict. I'll say 1-0 to Hibs. What are you saying, Mikey?
1-1. I genuinely don't see us winning the game.
Fair enough. So the next match we'll go on to is one that's in the top six, but it's tomorrow, and it's Stephen Naismith's side. They travel to Rugby Park. What are you making of this match?
I think it's a very, very entertaining match, I think, already. And it's either going to go one of two ways. It's either going to come back and bite me and it ends in a 0-0 draw, or it will actually be a very good game. And that's what I'm expecting because I think that both teams, although they maybe don't have too much to fight for, Hearts obviously are guaranteed third. I don't think there's any sort of question that they'll get third in my eyes because Kelly's would need to go on a miraculous run and Hearts would need to lose every game. So it's one of those situations where there might not be so much to play for, so it might open up the game a little bit. And I think it's a good chance for Kelly to lay a marker down going into next season because Hearts are the team that are sort of they were flying high for a while and they've dropped off a little bit, but they're still sort of right in that battle, and they'll want to bounce back after Sunday because they had a quite poor performance. So it's going to be an interesting game in my opinion. I think it will be very evenly matched. I think Hearts are probably going in as slight favourites, but it's at Rugby Park. It's on that plastic pitch, which is very, very difficult to play on. So it could go either way this one, but I'm probably just going to edge towards a draw. Very boring, but that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I mean you're going for a lot of draws. If that comes up in the old betting, you're in for a few quid, guys. But I think in terms of this match, it's probably two of the best teams outside of Rangers and Celtic this season, Mikey. I mean,
Yeah, I think there's no debate about that.
I think that Derek's done a great job at Rugby Park. I mean, I know Aberdeen fans can say that he did bad in the last couple of seasons he was there, but when Aberdeen were under good Derek McInnes, you always know you're in for a very difficult match.
See, and I'm in a family which has a lot of different sort of fans, different clubs around it. So I hear a lot from sort of everyone. And from the Aberdeen perspective, getting rid of Derek McInnes was not what the sort of ideal situation was from at least our side of the family. So for Aberdeen, getting rid of him was a very, very negative thing. And he's gone into Killysorry and done exactly what they needed to do. I think he's taken them to a similar position that Steve Clark was in, maybe not quite as good, but he's got a squad that's now it's good enough to be fighting up near the sort of top half of the league. And I think that next season, I don't think they'll be the one that drops off. I think that St Mirren and Dundee are the ones that will probably drop into the bottom half if Hibs and Aberdeen end up getting top half in that sort of season. But I think there's a situation where Kelly are really solidifying themselves as a top six club again, and provided Derek doesn't leave it, they can sort of really push on from this. And actually, in Scottish football, there's that real sort of opportunity to be the third best for a while because Hearts came up and sort of solidified themselves up in there, and Kelly have the chance to do the same. So I really do respect what Derek McInnes is doing, and if the option to bring him to Hibs came up, then I'd definitely take him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that you said that it's on that plastic pitch because I've only got one more year of it, and then hopefully they'll build a new training ground, and then they can move back to the grass.
Yeah, it'd be very positive for Scottish football as well if they did that.
Yeah, well then I think in terms of this match as well, it's going to be interesting because I don't know if you've been aware, Mikey, but there's been a lot of talk during the week about Danny Armstrong. He did an interview this week talking about possibly international recognition with Scotland or Republic of Ireland.
I think that Danny Armstrong's been I'd say he's always been a player that I've sort of liked because he plays the way that I used to try and play at my football team. I was never very good, but it was the kind of way that I wanted to play, tricky and fast down the wing. So I do really like him as a player, and I think he's one of those just very solid Premiership players. And I think that there might be a little bit of that sort of overreaction because I'd say he's no better than quite a few of the players down the years who maybe didn't quite get the recognition that he got. But I think he's been very, very good this season, and I think he's a very good shout for team of the season. And I'm a bit surprised that he didn't get in. So I'm not actually sure if he did get in, but if he didn't, he should have. So I mean, I'd be very surprised if he's there in a couple of years. But I think he's really solidifying himself as a very good player, and I yeah, again, he's someone that I'd definitely take a Hibs, although we'll never get him. But I think he's been very, very good, and he's going to be a main sort of threat if they do end up getting into Europe. And well, they will get into Europe, and if they're going to sort of progress on the group stage football, then he'll be very integral to that.
Yeah, and it just shows you a good success story of a couple of years ago. It was at Rafe Rovers, but building himself up, and then he's just progressed under Derek McInnes. Obviously, he wasn't involved much last year because Chris Burke was in it last year, but then he stepped up this year into being a big performer, and it just shows you that a couple of years ago, Derek McInnes was taking him up for the championship, but I think this season he's really been backed by the owner to bring in the player that he wants, like Watkins, like Mayo, like
And
Frisell,
Daba,
and Daba as well. Yep. So there's been so many that you can say that he's really got a stamp on. Even Greg Stewart. I mean, Greg Stewart has not played much. I mean, if you look at the Cabanag, they've probably got the best striker out with Rangers and Celtic last year, and that's Kevin Van Veen, and he hardly plays.
yeah, I think that's because he came back from an injury and he's sort of trying to get nursed back in. But it's obviously a very good sign when you brought in someone who scored so many goals last season and you're not relying on him to be rushed back into the team and they can sort of take their time with him. And I mean, I think it's something with Kelly where they came up with it was an okay squad, but it was nothing sort of groundbreaking, and they sort of kept themselves up last season and they've really kicked on this season. And they're kind of going back to that, as I said, the sort of Steve Clarke era where going to Rugby Park is one of those where you look at it on the schedule and you're like, oh no, this could be a real sort of stumbling block for us. And I'm very surprised that we didn't lose either game now this season because I thought that was a shoe in that we'd lose. So he's really made a big impact to that team, especially from where they were sort of 3 years ago going down to the championship. And that's just what you get from a Derek McInnes team. He'd just be hugely sort of he's very, very good at really solidifying a team as a top half, very solid team.
Yeah, and I know Graham was saying um, to us last week that Hearts put a decent performance in, but in terms of Hearts, were you disappointed in them last week? I know, obviously, as a Hibs fan, you would probably want them to get beat selfishly, but I mean, I don't think they put a great performance in.
I'd agree. I think that, as I said, going into the final third, they were okay, but when they got there, they didn't really create anything of note. And I think it's just sort of a recurring theme for Hearts, where they're in a situation where this is a very, very good opportunity for them to kick on, because Rangers have obviously stumbled a bit lately, and if they get to the final, then anything can happen, and such a good season for them. It's just yet again that disappointment where we've seen it year after year for them, and the term Hibs in it kind of became a big thing over the years, but Hearts have done the same. So it's a very difficult situation for them, and I think they just need to bounce back and confirm third, which is basically done already. So they can kind of they can kind of play their way for the end of the season and sort of regroup going into the new season, where there's obviously not a rebuild, but a bit of a sort of create a new team coming in. So I think it's a huge opportunity for them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you in terms of Hearts. Do you think the fans will be disappointed that they've got to that stage? Because they got to that stage a lot under Robbie Nielsen, but they always seem to fail at that stage. I don't know if it's a mentality issue, if they get scared of a derby match or scared of a big match against Celtic or Rangers, but they just always seem to freeze in those matches.
I think it just sort of highlights I'd say the golfing class between the old firm and the rest of everyone else, because for a team to be third best throughout the whole season, putting in very, very good performances. Obviously, they beat Celtic twice this season, which fair play to them, they've done very well. But I think when it comes to these big moments, and maybe a little bit of the mentality, but it's also just on the day they just don't perform sometimes. And when you're playing against the old firm, like you sometimes when it's 11v11, you don't always really see the sort of golfing resources and quality of the two sides, because it just becomes the 11v11 game. But you need to remember the budget gap where Hearts can Hearts could literally have perfect business year after year, and they'd still be miles behind the old firm, because they could just go and bring someone in from a different league, which none of the other teams could even dream of bringing in. So I think it just highlights the sort of difference between the old firm and the rest of the league. And Hearts are really an example of that, and I think that they've done very well this season. But it's another one where they go to the final block and just kind of stumble over it.
Do you think they'll keep hold of their top goal scorer, Shankland?
Uh, it's a very, very tough one, because I think he didn't go in January because it was halfway through a season, the Euro spots were up for grabs, and he just wanted to get Hearts back in again. So it's a very, very difficult one. So I'm not too sure, because it provided they get group stage football, which I'm pretty sure they will, or the league football, whatever it is. It's an incentive for him to stay, but the English Championship or the English even Premier League, which I don't think he'd do very well in, it's just one of those opportunities where a football player really gets their head turned by it, because of the standard and the just even like the reputation that you get for playing in it. So I think there's a huge sort of dangling carrot for him to leave, but also to stay. There's a lot of positives as well. So I think he'll get the last say, and I'd be I'd be genuinely surprised if he decides to turn around and say that he definitely doesn't want to stay. I think it'll be a very tough decision for him now.
Yeah, and for you, is he the main man for Scotland at the top of the attack, or would you throw in somebody else like a Ryan Hardy, a Lyndon Dykes, Che Adams?
I'd play Lauren Shanklin every day, because I think put Lyndon Dykes or Shea Adams in that Hearts team and they get 15 goals maximum in a season. And I just think Shanklin's a cut above them. And yes, he had a couple of poor performances in friendlies, but they're friendlies, they don't really matter too much. And even in the qualifiers, in the limited minutes he got, he scored. When he's played, he's looked very decent. And I think for the amount that he sort of torments Hibs fans, it'd be nice to actually be on his side for once. So I hope he does well at the Euros, and I hope he plays well. But I think I don't care who plays, as long as the person who does play gets the goals or just has a good performance. So I'd like to see him in, but if someone's going to do a better job than him, but then whatever means, just get the job done.
Yep. I Mikey. So what's your score prediction for that one tomorrow?
I'm
Uh,
gonna go. I'm gonna go a 2-2 draw with that one. I think it'll be. I think there'll be goals in it, but I think that it'll be one where Hearts fight back from a goal down and then go 2-1 up, and then Kelly score quite late on.
I think I'm right in saying Mikey's went for a draw in all three games so far.
I went for an Aberdeen win.
Oh,
I've kept one of them. Yeah,
yeah, you went for a draw for Hibs and a draw for Hearts. So, yep. So I'm going to go 2-1 to Kilmarnock.
I like that from you.
I just think that I just think that Derek McInnes will want to have a good end to the season after what they've done so far, and I think they'll be looking to build out. And I really do. I think in terms of Hearts, I think they'll probably a little bit downbeat after last week, thinking they've got nothing to play for. And also the fact that if you look at the rugby park, I mean, Kilmarnock are so used to playing on that, and like you said, that they're a very difficult team to beat there. I mean, even Celtic Rangers have found it difficult there. Rangers got a last minute goal through Tavernier to win that game there the last time. Celtic got beat there when they got beat 2-1 earlier on the season, and then they got beat 2-1 in the League Cup as well. So it's a very difficult place to go, rugby park. So I think it'll be 2-1.
Yeah, fair enough. I would not be surprised if that is the final score. To be honest.
Yep. Mikey, am I right in saying the next match you will be at tomorrow, and that is
Yes.
the bottom of the table clash between Ross County and at the Tony Macaroni Arena against David Martindale side, who are almost certainly relegated.
Yeah, they are definitely. And I think if they win tomorrow, it's just delaying the inevitable. But I hope they do win.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a big shame because Livingston have been a good team for a number of years in Scotland, so they've had their time. But yeah, I think this season they've fell off a little bit. But I think it just shows you as well, Mikey, that a lot of the times in Scottish football in particular, and probably English League One, Championship, and League Two, it is that every single season, a lot of these teams they have like they bring in 15 players and sell 15 players. So every season that it's a kind of are, are they're changing the squads up every single time. So it must be very difficult for Davies to do that.
I think it is, and with Livingston's very low budget, the lowest in the league. I think when he said this very well, and I think I'll come back to this because this was a quote he said in a interview. I think it was against Aberdeen or Celtic, one of the two. With like the likes of sort of Kelly and Motherwell and St Mirren, they're the sort of feeder clubs to the likes of Celtic, Hearts, and Rangers. But for Livy, they're feeder clubs to the likes of Motherwell, St Mirren, and Kelly. So it's very difficult being on such an uneven playing field. But they've done very well to sort of prolong their Premiership time. But I think after the World Cup, the sort of writing was on the wall because they fell off so drastically towards the end of last season. They were fourth going into that, and they ended up, I think, eighth in the league in the end. So it's been brewing for a long time, and this season it just seems like nothing's been going their way. They've missed game winning penalties. They've had last minute goals against them. Kelly springs to mind for that one, and it's just they've just lost so much of their quality out the squad. And also, if you want to talk about bad luck, they're going into the game tomorrow with 13 players. They're putting two goalkeepers on the bench and one outfield player, and the rest of them are just going to be bench fillers and injured and a couple of youth players. So I mean, you're working with the bare bones anyway, and you're losing. You're bringing two players back from injury, two more are going out, and going down to the championship, they're going to lose three-quarters of that squad because most of them, if not all of them, like three-quarters of their first team squad's out of contract, and I'd say maybe two or three will want to stay. So it'll be an absolute nightmare for them next season. And I mean, it's a situation where they'll have three or four outfield players in their squad on the 1st of June. So they're going to have to rebuild for the championship. And when you're in a situation like that, rebuilding within the space of 3 weeks is basically impossible if you want to at least win the league. Or, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them to even get into the playoffs next season. And surviving the drop in the championship might be their aim next season, based on the sheer mess that they're in. And that's just how the club's had to work because they're just they're so below everyone else that you have to bring players in on 1 year contracts in case you go down.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that everybody was talking about trying to play, possibly going to one of the Edinburgh Big Two and going to Championship a couple of times. But it's one of those things that Livingston, there was some great players over the years. I mean, we can't forget that they brought through Dykes, who's now a pivotal player for Scotland. They've Nicky Devlin, who was went on the Aberdeen, played in Europe. So they've put a lot of success stories. And what you've got to say, what David Martindale does on that small budget is really good.
Yeah, it's remarkable, and I think that I've kind of started getting into watching Livy games this season, so I've kind of learned a lot more about the club and how it works. And it is a real shame because the reliance on being in the Premiership is so huge for them because you bring in that money from being in the Premiership, and obviously there's a lot more expenses that go into it, but running the club on a day to day basis is very difficult for them. And for them to be top half 2 seasons running and be fighting up there, like fighting for top half basically every season, has been very, very good for them. And I think they're a team that I've really enjoyed being in the Premiership because obviously they're my local team. It brings a lot to the community because they do a lot of their sort of community days, and there's a lot of this sort of stigma about living with a plastic pitch and their sort of lack of fan base. But when you're stuck between Edinburgh and Glasgow geographically, you're gonna have a lot more fans switching to those. And I mean, it's been a non-stop slog for them for about 5 or 6 years, even longer than that, because they've had their financial problems in the past. So it's a club which you can throw shade at them all you want, but they're running on a day to day basis with the smallest budget in the league, and that just shows that they rely on their plastic park because they train on it, and without that, then like people don't know that if they had to rip up their plastic park, it would basically bankrupt them because they'd have to go and build their own training facility with money they don't have. They're in legal battles which could make the club go under anyway. So they're under such a difficult situation that their time might be up in the Premiership, but I mean it's going to be very very difficult for them. And I think people just need to kind of have that sort of eye out on these other teams that like it's difficult for them to run anyway, and it, they always have these sort of moments where you look down south for the likes of Berry and the sort of club dying and the sort of reaction that gave. And with Livingston, they could be in a similar situation. So sometimes people just need to sort of think about the situation that Livy are in sometimes. And it's just it's incredible they've been in the league this long.
Yeah, and obviously they've got a success story and David Martindale as well, because you know like he's been through as well, and obviously he had opportunities throughout his spell in the Premiership to move down south, but he's stuck by the club as well.
Yeah, and he's another one. The reason why he's still there, I think, is because of this, like the reliance on him from the club because he invests in it. He does a lot of the scouting, and he's such an integral figure in that club. He's been there for a good 8 or 9 years now, so he's so important to them and how they run. And I mean, take him out the club, and you're losing a lot of jobs, and it's a situation where it's very very difficult for them. But I think David Martindale needs to have all the respect in the world from the Livingston fans for just the day to day work he does for the club.
Yep, I just wanted to bring up this point. Donaldson's asking, is the Commander pitch, is it going to be up in terms for next season? Am I right in saying, Mikey, that it's the following season?
I think it's the end of next season, so it'll be 2025 that's getting ripped up and the grass park's going to be on.
There you go, Paul. That one for you. question there. If anybody wants to put in their questions, they're more than welcome because me and Mikey are here until 7 o'clock. Um, yeah, Mikey, so we'll move on to that match that we spoke about there. How do you see this going? Obviously, it's more important for Ross County because they've really picked up form the last few weeks. Obviously, the most notable result was on the telly a few weeks ago when they beat Rangers. Nobody expected that. They actually fairly played really well and they seemed to really buy into what the manager was doing. So, what have you made of them?
I think it's a very similar situation to Motherwell actually, where I thought they were actually quite good at the start of the season under Malky Mackay. I could not see why he got sacked. It must have been something behind the scenes because nothing was hugely going wrong on the park for them. They brought in Derek Adams, which was an absolute disaster. We all know that, and it was a shambles. And if he stayed, they would have been down, I think, because they would have been worse than Livingston. They brought in Don Cowie, who had a relatively slow start, but he kind of picked up a bit, and now they're looking like they're gonna survive another year in the Premiership. And for this game, I mean, a win over Livingston to send Livy down is a big incentive for Ross County. But on the contrary to that, Livingston have the chance to delay the inevitable by beating Ross County, and by some miracle, if it has a major momentum swing, then you never know. But I mean, it's very, very unlikely. But still, I mean, it's going to be almost impossible. But there's always that hope for them, and the manager and the team basically know they're down, so that there's a little bit less pressure on them in that sense.
Yep, and I did ask people to send in their questions. This one's coming in and it's asking, do you think that your team should sign a goalkeeper in the summer?
Yes, because our goalkeeper isn't good enough, and when Jojo Walcott's played, he hasn't looked great either. So I think that we need to have a new goalkeeper in, and that would majorly benefit us next season going into sort of a new era for the club. I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, this might be bad for me, but did you not sign Arthur Borridge's nephew or something?
Yes, we did, and he's on loan at Arbroath. He's not doing great, but we can't rely on a 21-year-old to be our number one goalkeeper straight away. We need to have that for a club which next season we're going to be fighting for Europe, hopefully. We're going to be aiming for Europe at least. We can't be having a 21-year-old inexperienced goalkeeper in goals. We need someone with a bit of that experience, but also with the ability to be keeping the shots out. And David Marshall did a good job last season, but he's looked very, very poor this time. So I think that bringing in a new goalkeeper has to be our second priority, but after actually getting a competent defence in. So I think bringing in a goalkeeper should be a major. It should be a major sort of talking point for the board in the summer, having to bring in a new goalie. So I think it's a necessity. I can't hear you, by the way. Your mic's gone off. Oh,
Sorry, Mikey, I was just to let you know your Wi-Fi kind of cut off at the end there. But yeah, I do agree with you in terms of you probably need to buy a brand new goalkeeper. Would there be anyone that you would pick out possibly from the Scottish Premiership?
Zach Hemming or Dimitar Mitov for me. They're the two that I'd be aiming for, in my opinion. I think those two are the best outside of the old firm Hearts. So yeah, those two are the main priorities for me.
Yeah, I mean, Mitov's been a good goalkeeper for St Johnson. I remember watching him against Celtic and Rangers, and he's playing. He's doing really well. And Zach Kempton, obviously, he's doing really well with St Mirren, but he also did well with Derek McInnes in the Championship when they
Yes,
come up against uh, Arbroath. Um, but no problem, Paul. It's always good to answer your questions, pal, and keep sending them in. Um, the next thing that I just want to ask you in terms of this match, do you think that if Ross County win, that might put a bit of internal pressure on with St Johnson because we know that if St Johnson don't win, that against your club tomorrow, then that could kind of drag St Johnstone and Ross County pretty close to each other.
I think the pressure's on anyway because the reliance of staying in the league for both of those sides is massive. So you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. The manager and the fans and the players will be under no illusion that they're in a battle for it. So it's not like they're gonna leave the park on Saturday and then realise, oh well, Ross County are only or actually above us or like 1 point behind us or whatever. So they're under no illusion of the pressure that they're under anyway. So I think if Ross County do win and St Johnstone lose, then it really does ramp up the pressure. But I think they're under no illusion that they're under the pressure anyway. So I don't think it changes anything major because Livy have had such a poor season. But I genuinely would not be surprised if Livy go out and win this because I mean, they genuinely have nothing to play for now, and the sort of board and not the board, sorry, the manager and the players sort of know that. So they're kind of just trying to play for a little bit of pride now.
Yeah, I'll just finally get your prediction for that.
Uh, I'm going to go 1-0 Livy just to try and make me happy tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go 2-1 to Ross County just because I think that Ross County will be buoyed by their last few performances, beating Rangers and then looking as if they've got their act together under Don Kirby. I think he's been a really good t- turnover of fortunes in terms of what he's getting out of these players because we've spoken about it on this show before, but Derek Adams when he was there didn't really do too well with them. And what Don Kirby's done in a short space of time, I think he's done really well. And Simon Murray was absolutely fantastic against Rangers.
Yeah, and I think Simon Murray's been their standout performer this season. I think he's actually been better than Danda because it just seems that in all the big moments he's really stepped up. And I watched him score 2 goals against Livy. I think he's been very very solid for them. And I think I heard on Sky Sports he scored the same amount of goals as Cyril Dessers in all competitions. I think it's changed now because Dessers scored a couple, but it's just his numbers have been very, very good for a team that it looked as though they were in a battle with Livy for last, and now obviously they've kind of pulled themselves out of that. So I mean, fair play to him, and I think that he's a little bit. I'd say he's a bit past that kind of big move because I think he's in his 30s now. But I think for the sort of age he's at and the situation he's in, I think he's done very very well this season.
Yeah, he has. The next match I just want to touch on would be the Sunday matches. See, in terms of those matches, right? I'm quite intrigued because I was looking at these earlier when I was doing my homework for this show put a, because we put a lot of research in, right? And I'm thinking, do you think that in terms of Rangers going away first, do you think them playing first plays a part in the title race, or that do you think I'm just over emphasising a bit?
I don't think that there's really any benefit of it because these players are professionals. We can't forget that. Like maybe if you're thinking of it from a sort of outside view, you might overplay the sort of importance of playing after or first, so that you can either lay the marker down or sort of put the pressure on if you're playing after because you've if you're playing afterwards, obviously you can match the result or beat it, and you can sort of pick up on the strays. But if you're playing first, then you can set the marker down and sort of lead the way. So I think there's positives and negatives of each. So I don't think it plays as much of a part as people think. And when you're in a situation where you're actually in that, then you can sort of look more at the negative aspects of playing first or last. So I don't think there's too much of an impact there. But I think we've seen it's more a mentality thing from Rangers' point of view because there's been obviously, as soon as the goings got tough for them, they sort of fell apart. And even against Hearts on Sunday, I don't think they were particularly inspiring. So I think that they're sort of in a poor sort of sort of a low ebb at the moment, I'd say. But it's a very difficult situation for both of them because when you're in a title race, it's very very difficult. And I think playing first or after has its negatives and positives.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking in terms of depending on the result either way. I mean, if St Mirren get a result, that could then boost Celtic on to go. If we can get a win, that could basically secure the title.
I think that you can never sort of celebrate too early in Scottish football, but I think that Celtic have all the momentum on their side now because Rangers have to travel to Parkhead, and I don't think they'll win that at all because we've just seen the mentality that the Rangers players have. It just hasn't been good enough. And from a Celtic perspective, going to Dundee, I'd say is an, a slightly easier task than going to St Mirren, and I think that this could really be a banana skin for Rangers because as I said, they're not exactly playing the best football at the moment, and going to St Mirren in this sort of time in the season could really, I guess it could really derail their title hopes, which are kind of fading anyway. So I wouldn't be too confident going into this game as a Rangers fan, but also you can't forget that if Rangers end up winning and Celtic losing it, the sort of I guess the storyline changes again. So just going on a week by week basis, you can't really tell which team's on top. But right now, it's looking like Celtic are.
Yeah, just starting off with that first game, I think that match against Stephen Naismith's team last week really settles the pressure on the manager because if he goes 3 games without winning a match, then that really makes the pressure big for him. But I think the fact that they won that game and Hearts never really laid a, glo- a glove on them, it just relieves a bit of pressure on the manager for building confidence again.
I think it's a thing with both Old Firm fans where they're in a situation where if you don't win the league, it's basically as good as finishing last because it's a complete failure. So when these games kind of pop up where you've lost one or two in a row, or not even lost, like they lost to Ross County and drew with Dundee, which are two very poor results. So I think that the pressure kind of mounts a lot quicker on the old firm managers, and we saw it with Brendan Rodgers, where I think he lost 2 games against Killian Hearts, and people were wanting him out, and that's kind of dragged on. Where as soon as they now drop points, it's sort of the end of the world. And I mean, go back 3 weeks ago to say that Philippe Clement is under pressure would be an absolutely ludicrous statement to make. So it's it's just one of those where you can you can kind of get a bit carried away when you're in a situation where you're in a title race. So I think it's been a bit blown out of proportion, and the media is very good at that as well. So yeah, I don't think there's as much pressure on as people might think. But I mean, if they go and lose to St Mirren, that's 3 league games out of winning in. There's a couple of questions that need asked to, and I'd blame the players because we've seen it time and time again that they just don't have the mentality when there's any real pressure on.
Yeah, obviously I was doing a bit of research before the start of the show, and there's quite a lot of chat about online like about Tavernier and Golson possibly joining Gerrard. Is that something that you see possibly happening? Because I, I think I, I think I would see it happening because they've been in Scotland now for quite a number of years.
I think I'll go into this briefly because I think that when I saw it earlier, it kind of frustrated me a little bit because I mean, Goldson, fair enough, they've been very consistent with that. Where I'd say he's not been good enough this season. I think he's made way too many mistakes, and he's had quite a few basketball moments over the last few years where he seems to like punching the ball away. But I mean, James Tavernier to be for Rangers fans voting him out after 1 defeat and 1 draw, I find is ridiculous because they've been going on all season about him being captain fantastic and the best goal scoring right back in British football and all this stuff. And as soon as a couple of games don't go in their favour, it's the end of the world and he's not good enough and he's not a good enough leader. So he's dug them out of holes many times this season, and I mean for them to be wanting him out, I find is ridiculous. Connor Goldson, I can see why, but James Tavernier, it's ludicrous, I'd say, for Rangers fans to be wanting him out.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one person you can thank for still being in a title race, it's probably James Tavernier because he's
Exactly,
stepped up so many times with free kicks, the dreaded one penalty, but also
loads of them.
aye, and obviously he scored quite a few goals as well. So, and for a right back to score that many goals is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And he dragged them over the line in the Viaplay Cup when it was looking like it was sort of fizzling out towards. You can't really say it's fizzling out towards extra time when there's 15 odd minutes left in the game, but the game was so poor in quality wise, where it was just like, I mean, he's the one that digs him out of holes time and time again. So it's just, I find it ridiculous that I find it ridiculous that Rangers fans want him out, and he's gotten over the line, as I said, in so many games this season, to the point where after two games wanting him out is just it's mental in my eyes.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit. Yep. But like I was saying there, if it's Saudi Arabia that's coming in, then it's a lot of money. And Steven Gerrard, they've worked with him before. Do you think they'd be possibly tempted?
I think that sort of the prospect of Gerrard coming in is obviously a very big one, but they're 32 and 31 years old, so it you're not going to get ridiculous money out of them because I mean, obviously with Saudi Arabia, it's almost like a sort of endless pit of money that they have. But I mean, when you're 32 and 31, like you're not going to be spending 15, 20 million on them, and I just don't see I just don't see the point because James Tavernier, when he goes, I think it's going to be one of those where they don't realise what they have until they lose him,
Yep.
because when he goes, if he goes in the summer, who's your free kick taker? Who's your penalty taker? Who's going to dig you out of those moments when you're in such a difficult situation? And honestly, I think that it would really. I think the one thing I'd say to Rangers fans is just be careful for what you wish for because next season I don't see many natural leaders in that club. I mean, John Lundstrom you could sort of point to as one of them, but I just don't see where that same leadership comes from. And Tavernier, he's had that experience of getting them up from the Championship and just all those years for the highs and low times at Rangers. And I just think losing him would be such a detriment to them, where it's not an opportunity to get rid. It's sort of it'd be a real negative if he gets ripped out of them. Different story for Goldson, in my opinion, because he's had such a poor season. But I think it's two very individual cases where there's different outcomes in my eyes.
Yeah, I think a lot of times because people think it's Saudi Arabia, players will jump at the chance. But we've seen it with Jordan Henderson this season. Like, I mean, he was saying that they're playing in front of 200 people, 300 people, and it's that there's no one there, and the intensity is not the same. And then he goes to Ajax, so sometimes the grass is not always green on the.
That's the thing, and I mean Jota left Celtic in the summer, who was on top of the world, and he's looking like he's done with Saudi already. And we saw it with the Chinese league in 2016 and 17, where they all sort of jumped to the opportunity, and after 6 months, a year, they're like, "Oh, hold on, this might actually be really detrimental to us because there's a real risk with these we're going to these new leagues, and there's no guarantee that you'll do well. I need to go for 5 minutes. I'll just put myself on mute if you're all right. Just going over the next game.
No problem. Aye, so as Mikey was saying there about Tavernier going to Saudi and stuff, Rangers have updated this, speaking in terms of they've got a few injury problems. Abdallah Sima is he's injured for the next couple of matches, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how they go on from that. But in terms of this match on Sunday, we've also got the added incentive that if St Mirren win on Sunday, a fifth spot in the Premiership now is um, is a European spot. So it's going to be interesting for that point of view in terms of St Mirren have got a lot to play for here because they could be in European football for the very first time in a long time. Because I don't know if St Mirren fans are in the comments, but I can't remember the last time St Mirren played in 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 in, Eu- in the European football. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that plays a part. In terms of the match on Sunday, I'm sure Stephen Robinson, I'm sure he's got the firepower that can damage Rangers. I mean, you've got Barkas, you've got Ayunga, Marco Hara. You've got players like that who can really handle the ball and really take people on, and I'm sure Connor Goals is not looking forward to be up against John Ayunga either. You know, so they've got a lot of players in that squad that are really going to cause Rangers problems. Mike, are you back? Are you back on with us?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm ready now.
Aye, so I was just talking there about in terms of St Mirren. I can't remember the last time they were in European football, Mikey, but I was doing a bit of digging today, and the fifth place spot now that is going to be a European spot. So that is a big incentive for Sunday's match as well.
It isn't. I mean, St Mirren, they aren't quite out of the woods yet because Dundee are right behind them. They're only a few points, but few points back. So they have a lot to play for. Rangers obviously have the title to fight for, but it's looking like it's kind of slipping away. And I heard your point about Connor Goldson against Ayunga. I would be astonished if Connor Goldson plays because it looks like he's been dropped now for the poor performances and bringing. I think the Suter and Balogun will be the way forward until the end of the season. So yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting game to watch. I think because there's a when you're sort of in a title race, every game matters so much that even one slip up can sort of derail your whole season. And we've seen that in multiple games. And I could honestly see St Mirren winning this game. And I think just looking at a Rangers win just seems quite unrealistic at the moment. And I would honestly be more surprised if Rangers win. Yet again, being the boring one, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends in a draw. But we're not going to go with a draw this time because I think I've predicted enough draws this week. But yeah, I think it will be a very interesting game.
So you're going for us for a St Mirren win?
I'll go with a 1-0 St Mirren win. I'm just going to go out there with that.
There you go then, Mikey. See if we come on here next Friday, and Mikey's got a win for Aberdeen, a draw in the other two, and then a Rangers win. There's going to be a lot of millionaires here.
Well, St Mirren win. Do not put Rangers down for a win. Then you're right.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, St Mirren to win. I mean, there's going to be a lot of millionaires. I mean, Mikey. I mean, you're going to make a lot of people rich. But
Yeah.
I think in terms of this match, Stephen Robinson, I think we've secured what we're supposed to do. But these are the matches that you relish to play in.
Yeah, and I think that obviously that there's a bit of pressure on St Mirren, as I said, but it's a chance for them to lay a marker down, as I said. And when you go into the sort of closing end of a season, these results can really carry you over the line because we all know that you're going to get more of a mental boost by beating a Celtic or a Rangers than beating Dundee. Even if you're in such a close battle with Dundee, you know that if you can beat Celtic or Rangers, then you can go and beat the other one, and you can go and beat Hearts and Kelly. If you beat Dundee, then well done. You've got the points over them. You've now sort of got that, but it doesn't really give you that sort of belief that you can go and beat the old firm and obviously the teams right above you. So I think this will be a huge opportunity for them to sort of wrap up their position before it's mathematically possible. So I think it's got a huge. I think there's huge implications on both sides of this game because if Rangers go and beat them 4-0, then obviously the heads drop and Dundee have that chance to push above them. But I think that it's going to be a very, very close contested game, and I could see St Mirren just nicking a late winner.
Yeah, and let's move on to Sunday at 3 o'clock. All eyes and all ears will be on Celtic's travelling up to Dundee. I'm sure all the Dundee fans and Celtic fans will be hoping that it's not raining on them on Sunday because
Yep,
that Dundee PA system was brilliant against Rangers. I mean they were doing all the songs
yeah.
um, about rain and that. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be, but yeah, I'm just hoping that they're able to play the match.
I mean, the weather's been a lot better recently, so here's hoping. But I think that the game will go ahead. I'm going to give a bold prediction and say it will actually go ahead for once. But I think it'll be a yet again. It's not a certain Celtic win. It's one of these seasons where anything can really happen, and I would yet again I'd be surprised if Dundee win, but I would not be surprised if it's a very very tough game for Celtic. And we saw how they played against Rangers, that they have the ability to not only sit back and preserve a draw, but go toe to toe with their opponents and really make it difficult. We've seen them get beat 3-0 off Celtic in December, and that was a bit of a nothing game because the game was kind of over after, I'd say, I think they were 2-0 up at half time or something, if I remember rightly, or it was quite close for a large period of the game, but as soon as Celtic went 1-0 up, you just need to kind of get over the line. But it's one of these games again where anything can happen. And Dundee could go on and win this game, but I'm not going to go with that. I think that Celtic will just get the job done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Celtic are starting to get in starting to go in the groove again. But like you said, Dundee had a great performance against Rangers at home.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, Celtic have been getting back in the groove. They've been getting the results going, but I mean, the old firm they'll be kicking themselves that they didn't get 3 points out of that. And then you've got the game where at Aberdeen or at Hampden where they had a not a certain win, but if they held out a couple more minutes on two occasions, they would have got the win, and obviously it went right to the wire. Had they lost that semi final, it'd be a very different sort of outlook on it because you'd be thinking they threw away a two-goal lead against Rangers, and then they've gone and threw away two two sort of situations where you're up a goal in the last minute and you've thrown it away on both occasions. So I guess obviously the end result obviously changes narratives, but I mean Celtic have been getting the performances up, and that's the thing with champions when things are kind of going against you, you sort of claw it back and win by a goal or two. And we've seen it against St Johnstone, we've seen it in other games as well. So they do look like a team that are going to be lifting the trophy, but again, there's no guarantee that they'll go to Dens and win because they've shown it against Hearts, they've shown it against Rangers that you're not always going to get a win against them at Dens.
Yeah, I know Michael will probably ask me in a few weeks' time when the season's at its climax, Mikey, but for me, the manager of the year's got to be Tony Dockery.
I'd slightly disagree. I think there's a couple of people above him, but he's definitely up there. I'd say that I'd probably put Stephen Naismith, probably Clement for the way he's turned it around, and Derek McInnes over him. But apart from that, he's definitely there. I'd say he's just above Stephen Robinson, but you cannot overstate the ability that he's managed to bring into that club on loan. And I think I don't want to be the sort of pessimist, but next season will be a very difficult one for them because they're going to be going in with quite a lot of the core team is going to be leaving back to their parent clubs. So they've done very well in solidifying themselves, and getting top half was just the cherry on top. But I mean, next season will be a slog for them. But they just need to focus on the last 5 games of this season and try and get something out of them. But I mean, if they get European football, then that kind of maybe is a bit of an incentive for a lot of those loan players to sort of become permanent. But yeah, I think they've done a very, very good job. And Tony Dockett, he's been influential in that, no doubt.
Who would you say has impressed you the most of Dundee this season? Because I've been impressed with so many. Probably Bakayoko for me.
I'd go Owen Beck. I think Owen Beck just the ability that he's brought from fullback, where obviously fullbacks are very important, but how he's managed to stand out as a key player. He's scored goals, he's got assists, he's got forward, he's got back, and I think he's been excellent. Mo Salah and Malachi Boateng, the two midfielders, have been excellent. Obviously, Lyle Cameron and Luke McCowan have been good as well. There's a huge amount to choose from, but I'd probably go with Owen Beck just for the influence he's had on the team. And every time I've seen Dundee, he's been sort of the almost the outball for them. He's been one of their key players going forward, and defensively he's not looked shaky either. So I'd go with Owen Beck, but also Amadou Bakayoko's done very well as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Dundee, I know there's been a lot of criticism well, we had a home pitch, but I think they've overachieved this season because that's my big reason for Tony Docherty being the manager of the year is that it's not something that I expected. I expected Dundee to be scraping for their lives and really fighting it down there and hoping that they would get there, but they've really overachieved in terms of solidifying themselves in that top six. And I think to even push for Europe in your first managerial job, also a lot of the players last year were playing championship football, so it can't be underestimated the job that Tony Docherty's done. But obviously, people from the Aberdeen and from Rugby Park will say that Tony Docherty is a very good coach, but you still need to go there and do it as a manager.
Yeah, and I think I actually predicted Dundee to finish bottom, which is not something that I'm very proud to be saying. But I mean, they've obviously hugely overperformed, and I think a lot of the sort of expectations for them to go down came from the last time they were in the league because I mean, the last time they were in the league, they were pretty brutal in my opinion. They were, and the last couple of times, 2018-19, they went down with one of the lowest points tallies ever. 21-22, they went down really without much of a fight. So I mean, it's the last two times, which is, I guess, it's made this achievement even better because they've shown that you can come up to the Premiership and compete when the money's not always there. And I mean, I think that I'm going to come back to David Martindale again. I think he put it well that you could put any of the top four or five in the Championship in, and they'd slot into the Premiership nicely in the same way around. So I think I think that the gap between the Championship and Premiership isn't that high, and they've just managed to hugely overachieve. And no small part of that's down to Tony Docherty. I think he's been one of the obviously the key figures in that, and he's got a lot of players in.
Yeah, I think in terms of like, I think it's like obviously you can say he's been a good coach, but it's totally different from going a number two to being a number one. We've seen that with Michael Beale. People were saying that Michael Beale was a great coach, but it's totally different being that figurehead every single day, dealing with the press, dealing with everything that comes with it, dealing with and see being a manager. It's not just like dealing with tactics. It could be like maybe they're dealing with problems off the pitch with the players. They're dealing with like um, disciplinary situations like a first team coach or an assistant manager is just simply putting out the training drills and stuff like that, making sure things are running smoothly. So it's a totally different changing role for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's maybe the main thing which has the sort of shout for manager of the year because obviously they've hugely overachieved, but I think other teams have done better than them relatively. But I mean, it's just the change from being that assistant to finding yourself in a completely new role, and a lot of managers can get swallowed up by that. I remember Paul Clement at Swansea. He was the backup to Ancelotti at Bayern Munich. He came into Swansea and failed pretty miserably. And I mean, with Dundee, there's that pressure of them being maybe the eighth or ninth biggest club in the country. So it's a very difficult, so it's a very different sort of role, as you said, to come into. And I think he's done it with flying colours, and I mean that's really going to kick him on into his future jobs. And I could see him being a manager of one of the big teams in Scotland, or also moving elsewhere. But I can really see the sort of vision he has. But obviously, we'll have to see how he adapts next season when three quarters of the squad will be there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. In terms of Dundee, do you see them really causing Celtic problems?
I mean, yeah, I don't see any reason why they won't. I think that they'll be strong defensively and they'll be that threat that they carried against Rangers because they genuinely they have a lot to play for, but there's no pressure on them because they've already overachieved. They've already got that's they've obviously got, sort of go over that hurdle that they didn't even expect to be at in the first place. So European football for them is just a bonus now. Obviously, you've got a little bit of that pressure that if you get European football, you're setting yourself up better for next season. But there's no guarantee that they'd adapt well to Thursday, Sunday football either. So I mean, for Dundee, I think they're in a good spot regardless of if they get Europe or not. So, I mean, they can go into this without the pressure. Celtic are leading the title race, which you've obviously got the sort of, I guess, that pressure of trying to keep that gap ahead of the other team instead of chasing. So, for for Dundee, I think they'll see us as much more of an opportunity than a pressure situation where they're holding on to anything because they've already got their targets this season. So, yeah, I think fair play to them, and I think they will cause Celtic troubles because they're going to play without fear now.
Yeah, and just touching on Celtic, Brendan Rodgers said to the press last week that this is a time where Celtic really turn on the style. Do you see that in the performance in the performances the last few weeks? Obviously, it's a difficult one in terms of the Scottish Cup is a different one in terms of going through on penalties, but it's still bringing on that momentum that they had. I think when they've brought in Vickers and Rio, that's really changed the dynamic of the squad. And I think now for me, I can really see Celtic moving on fast because they seem to have their mojo back.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think that I'm not going to say it was an artificially made title race because obviously it wasn't because there was obviously the little gap. There was obviously such a little gap, and obviously the fight in it. But I think that the Celtic losses really, I'd say it really sort of highlighted the not the weakness and the depth of their squad, but when I watched them against Hibs, that was one of the most flat performances I've seen from Celtic. They didn't really look concerning when they went forward, which is very unlike them. And I mean, I was at the Livy Celtic game when Rio Hatate came back, and they looked a completely different team because he could just run the midfield. And when you see these players in person, they're so much better, and you can really just they're doing things that you can't even see what they're doing. Like they're picking out passes that seem impossible. And when you have those players coming in for a title race that can, as you said, put the style on and be more ruthless than their sort of maybe less so players like Iwata and to an extent Stephen Welsh and stuff who are not quite as um, compounding and so solid in their positions. You know, there's you get a real boost from that, and I think that in the title race now that they're in, I think they'll really kick on from that, and I think that they can wrap up the title in the next few games. But putting on the style and the sort of performances, I wouldn't fully agree because I think they sort of struggled against Rangers, especially in the second half, and against Aberdeen, they definitely made it difficult for themselves. So I don't think they're putting the style on, but getting those results over the line is what you need for a title winning team. It's not always about putting five or six past everyone.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We've got somebody that's put in there. Do you see anyone that's ideal for Celtic to bring in as a replacement for Joe Hart?
Um, yeah, again, I would maybe say someone like Hemming because I think he could take the step up, but you've got options sort of left field as well. Livakovic was one that was being talked about, Lunin as well, but I think a situation where Celtic are in that they really want to sort of push on and become that European team now that can get those results in. So I'm not hugely sure, but I mean, there's obviously
What
going to be
about,
options out there.
what about that guy from Liverpool that
Kelleher,
Keller are talking about? Yep.
yeah, he'd be a very solid option. I think they just need someone that I'm the first to say that I don't think Joe Hart's been very good this season, and I think that it's his time to kind of move on. I didn't think he'd retire. I think he'd go to a different club, but I mean, it's, I think they do need a replacement now. Obviously, they do because Segrist isn't going to be a natural number one. So they'll have options, and I think that they'll, regardless of who they bring in, as long as it's not someone like Barkas, who probably gives Celtic fans nightmares. But I mean, as long as it's somebody that's going to be competent, they'll definitely do a good job. But they need to pick the right man out.
Yeah, they do because they don't want another Barcash story.
No, definitely not.
But yeah, in terms of that, it just shows you how important that the position is, and and you've seen that with Rangers this season with Jack Butland as well.
Yeah, and I think Jack Butland's been influential in Rangers' sort of successes because he's kept so many. when you're playing for the Old Firm, you're not going to have 20 shots at you a week, so it's kind of hard to sometimes gauge how good a keeper is. But everything that seems to come his way, he's very solid with it. The thing with Joe Hart is he let quite a few of them in, which he shouldn't have. The one that instantly springs to mind is a Beakers goal back in November for Motherwell. So there's goals in there that Butland has saved that Joe Hart maybe hasn't, and that was one sort of positive that Rangers had from in the title race. But I think that Joe Hart has done decently well since I'd say the turn of the year. So I think that the pressure's kind of to get a new good goalie in is always kind of there. But I think that there's quite a few options there, so they need to explore all their options, and I'm sure they'll get one that's the right one.
Yeah, someone I've been impressed with over the past few weeks, Mikey, is uh, Adam Ida. What do you make of him? Because I was someone that was quite negative when he joined. I'm quite openly to say that I was quite negative that he wasn't the kind of be all and end all. I was sort of worried that he was the second choice striker, that it wasn't going to be possible for him to get up to speed because he hardly played for Norwich. But what have you made of him? Because I've been really impressed.
I'd say he's been hot and cold because in his debut against Hibs, that was one of the worst striker performances I've ever seen, and that's genuinely being honest. He missed 3 or 4 sitters, and then against Livingston, he was quiet as well. So every time I've watched him, he's been pretty poor. But I mean, I've seen him a few times. He gets the goals in, which is what you need. So if you're scoring goals, you know, is when you're losing games and you're missing 3 or 4 chances to score with Dessers, it gets more publicised that the mistakes you're making because you're obviously relying more on those goals going in. So with Adam Ida, he has the chance to miss 1 or 2 if he's going to go and score 2 or 3. So I mean, he's both hot and cold, but I think that he's been a relative success because there wasn't really that much expectation on him. So I think he's done decent, and obviously he made a couple of mistakes. The one against Hearts as well, the missed penalty. Though there's been a few games where he's been poor, but I think on the whole he's been pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, Gregor McIntosh is coming in and he's saying that he thinks it'll be a draw.
I think there's every chance that it will be. I can see the definitely unbiased opinion from him there, but I think it'll be a very tough game. But I could see Celtic winning 2-1 or 1-0. I think there will be one goal in it, but I just think that when it really matters for Celtic this season, they tend to find a way. Obviously, Motherwell twice, both away from home. That's the one that springs to mind, St Johnstone. And there's obviously the Hibs one as well, which I don't like to talk about. But those ones, and I think that more often than not, they just find a way. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they go and score a last minute winner again.
Yeah, I mean, Celtic have got that power under Brendan Rodgers to just win titles. And
Yeah,
although people talk about the way that Brendan Rodgers left, one thing Brendan Rodgers always does here in Scotland is that he knows how to win.
he does. And it was also a sort of staple of his first time in charge, where obviously they went those, I think it was 68 games unbeaten or something like that, or like all things considered. And there was about 13 or 14 of those where they were comfortably winning 5 or 6-0, and then the rest of them were 1 or 2 goals in the games. And I think that on the whole, he's very good at getting just games over the line. And for Celtic, you've got the sort of a lot of that kind of comes down to the the sort of quality of players that they have, where they're going to be less tired out by the end. They have better options off the bench. But I mean, a lot of that still has to go down to the manager. I think that they've been very good at that over the years under Brendan Rodgers, and I think that when you're playing Celtic, you're never comfortable until the final whistle's gone. It's the same with Rangers as well, but when you're playing against other teams and you're maybe 1 or 2 nil up going into the last 10 minutes, there's obviously a little bit of apprehension, but there's obviously that sort of belief that you'll get it done. But with Celtic, you're just never confident. So I think that one lapse in judgment from Dundee and they could concede their goals. So and once you're 1-0 down against Celtic, there's a mountain to climb. So I think that it's going to be very difficult for them. But I could genuinely see them getting something out of the game. I just don't personally think we will.
Yeah, I mean, um, for thank you for everybody that's been able to get in touch with us tonight, because it's It's been great for you to stay involved with us. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the score prediction for this game.
As I said, I'm stuck between 1-0 and 2-1 Celtic, but I'm gonna go 2-1 just so there's more goals in the game. But if it goes to 2-1 Celtic, I think Dundee will score the first goal.
I'll go 3-1 to Celtic.
It's pretty similar then.
I just think if Celtic get the first goal, then it could be a long afternoon, a long afternoon for Celtic, for Dundee. But if Dundee get that first goal, then it could be a long afternoon for Celtic trying to rescue the title back off Rangers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that now Celtic have that little bit of a cushion over Rangers. It's a little bit the pressure's off a little bit. So if they're 1-0 down, the heads might not sort of drop, or the nervousness might not come in quite as much. But there's still that pressure there. So there's obviously no guarantees that Celtic will win the title. And I think that some people are forgetting that. People are thinking the title's over already. It isn't. It only takes one or two games to go against them, and then it's right back on again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a great season so far, and I'm sure we'll get back onto the Premiership the action next week. Just touching on the Championship for a minute, Mikey. We've got Dundee United are playing, and they can win the title. Well, I think it's a goal swing of 30, so it's 18 goals, I think it is.
Mm.
I think they're virtually guaranteed to go up, but yeah, they've had a bit of topsy t- a topsy turvy season because I remember listening to this show and many other shows where there's been a few Dundee United fans that have been very disappointed in the manager and wanting Jim Goodwin to be sacked.
I think despite their, I'd say, obviously success in winning the league, which they will now, there's no way you're going to get an 18 goal swing. But I think that mathematically, if they do it tonight, then fair enough. But I think it's been a bit of a, I guess it's more of a negative season in my eyes, because I think that walking into this league, Dundee United were the major favourites because they've got basically everything on their side. They've got the best squad in the league, maybe not the best manager, but the sort of best reputation manager in the league. They've got the biggest budget. So they probably, in my eyes, should have walked this league, and they've made a real challenge of it. So I would say it's kind of similar to Kelly when they came up, because the positivity wasn't quite as high, because when Kelly went down to the Championship, they were expected to walk the league, and they made it very difficult for themselves. But with Dundee United, I think that Raith Rovers have done a good job keeping pace with them. But it has been a bit, as you said, a bit of a sort of topsy turvy season, and I could genuinely see a bit of the negativity creeping back in at the start of next season.
Yeah, I mean, I know you keep a close eye on the championship as well. I mean, there's been a few of the player of the year nomination this week. Is there anyone that stands out for you? For me, probably Brian Graham, Partick
I would,
Thistles.
yeah, I was going to say that, but I think that Kai Fotheringham needs a bit of a shout in there, because I think that he's managed to stand out in a team, in a Dundee United team, which I'd say has been quite average for their standards, at least. I think obviously Robbie Muirhead and George Oakley at Morton did a very, very good job. They've obviously dropped off a bit now, but yeah, I'd probably go with Brian Graham just because of the sort of influence he has over that Partick Thistle team. The role that he plays is massive. He's obviously part of the women's setup as well. So I think just obviously that won't play into the Player of the Year debate, but I think just for the importance he has to Partick Thistle, he's got to be up there. And I think without him, they'd probably be outside the playoffs. So I'd probably go with Brian Graham as well.
Yeah, and then for League One, the obvious standout for me would be Morrison at Falkirk because
Yeah,
they're
I'd go Callum Morrison. I
yeah, I
don't
mean,
really think there's any debate, but Kevin O'Hara's got a shout in there for Hamilton as well. Bobby Wales with Alloa, but I think that there's one that stands out over the rest, and that's obviously Callum Morrison.
yeah. I mean, for anyone that doesn't know, that doesn't watch League One, Falkirk are going for an unbeaten season tomorrow. They're playing Allen Athletic, so they'll be hoping that they can go unbeaten. I mean that would just be an incredible achievement for them.
It has been, and I mean, you wouldn't think it after the last few seasons they've had because it's not like they've been sort of there or thereabouts. They got beat massively the last time. I think they got beat, was it 6-1 on aggregate? The last time that they played in the playoffs, and they finished sixth the season before that, so there wasn't really anything leading up to it. I think they've just hugely, I guess, overachieved this season. Hamilton have dropped off hugely, but I think the Falkirk have well and truly deserved to win the title, and I'd love to see them do it unbeaten, and I'll be very interested to see how they'll stack up in the championship next season.
Yeah, definitely. And just quickly, we'll touch on that the Scotland squad for the Euros is moving up from 23 to 26. Is there anyone that stands out for you, Mikey, that would possibly go in that squad? If I,
I think there's obviously a couple of players on the fringes, which is the sort of Lewis Morgan and Ryan Gold, who they've been the sort of the sort of outside choice, which haven't really been getting in the squads, but people have been arguing they should be. I think this gives them the opportunity to get in, and I wouldn't want it to be another goalkeeper. I wouldn't want another keeper in there. I think
no,
that it would be a very, very bad idea to bring another goalie. I think that we need another outfield player, but you're not going to be able to play 26 players in potentially 3 games. So I think you need to. It's going to be difficult because it's going to be. It's obviously a positive because you can bring more players in, but this also opens the door to the likes of obviously Danny Armstrong and Blair Spittle to come in. So I think it's a positive because it opens the door to other players. At least just getting that opportunity to be in the Scotland squad.
yeah, I mean, for me, I would go with Danny Armstrong. I think he's a great season. He's 26 years of age, and I think one of the big things we were missing was that out and out winger against Northern Ireland in the friendly, even though I don't analyse friendlies too much. Mikey, just quickly, we'll move on to the snooker. A little bit different from football tonight, which we've been talking for the last hour, hour and a half. I just want to say that John Higgins is he leading in his match down at Sheffield so far. So hopefully John Higgins gets through to
Yeah,
an- another round in Sheffield. But the one thing I wanted to touch on with tonight was that, I don't know if you heard the story on Eurosport yesterday that they were talking about that someone wants to move the stadium of Sheffield to Saudi Arabia over in over the next few years. I think for me that would be a big shame because I think the Scottish players of snooker have really enjoyed Sheffield.
I think. Oh, I don't watch snooker at all, but I did see a little bit about that. For me, it's like moving Wimbledon to the United States. I don't see the point in it, and it's like moving. It's like moving these big sporting events to completely different like locations, and we've seen it with boxing, obviously getting moved to the likes of Saudi, and obviously there's a lot of money motivation going into that. But it's one of those ones where it's like, as I said, moving Wimbledon across to Saudi Arabia, or just I think it would be a bit of a shame, but I don't watch snooker, so it won't really impact me at all.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where, like you said, if it's tennis, then it needs to be played in London at Wimbledon. If it's the horse racing, it needs to be played at the Grand National in England. All of these sporting events should be played where they were played years ago, no matter where the money's coming from and stuff like that, because it takes away the sporting integrity as well. And just finally, Mikey, I want to touch on that Rangers and Celtic are playing in a very important match for Celtic and Rangers on Sunday.
Yes, um, it's on BBC. I can't remember, but
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah,
yeah, I'll probably be watching it because I think that it's obviously this is the women's game, isn't it?
yes,
Yeah, yeah. So obviously the women's football's taken like a big, obviously been surging for the last few years. So I think this is a yet again getting televised old firm women's derbies on BBC for the general public to watch, and just getting such a huge crowd. It's huge for the game growing, and I think that can only be a positive. I've obviously seen it with Hibs. There's obviously a lot more advertisement about the women's game, and it's obviously getting a lot more publicised. And I think one thing with the women's game that's slightly frustrating is just that the grounds aren't big enough that they're getting played at. Obviously, you need to find that sort of middle ground between getting a stadium you can fill and not playing in like a university back pitch, which they did for for the Hearts Hibs game. So I think that just for the chance to get a game at Hampden with such a big sort of crowd is a huge one for the women's game, and I think it'll be a huge positive.
Yeah, I think it will. And Mike, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great to have you on.
No problem. Thanks for having me back.
No problem, and you can catch us next week at Friday between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And hopefully Graham and Michael will be back to join us. Thank you for joining me.
Bye bye.